What is a voice? Is it something you're born with, something you build, or something you spend a lifetime trying to understand? I'm Liam Joshua Munn, vocal pedagogue, actor, and someone who's spent years asking these questions. And I'm a big Jim Carrey fan. This is going to be a series of conversations with Broadway and opera artists about technique, storytelling, and what it really means to live inside of your voice. This is a vocal project.
Our guest this week is probably one of my favorite male voices on Broadway. Whether I'm seeing him through a live recording of Rent, the cast recording of Big River, or the Lincoln Center archive tape of my favorite musical and yours, The Wild Party. To
Mm,
me, this man represents what was part of the welcoming of authentic contemporary singing to Broadway.
mm.
Guys, Michael McElroy, everybody!
Thank you. That's quite an introduction. Wow.
I'm not kidding. I remember. Now, I don't want to make you feel old, Michael McElroy, because you're not.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw that recording of Rent, and that was pretty crazy.
Hmm. Yeah, it was uh incredibly special because I had been in the show in 1997. I replaced Jesse Martin in the original, and then did the show for 2 years, almost 2.5 years until I left to go do the Wild Party. And then after the Wild Party closed, I went back to Rent for another 6 months. And then 6 years later, they called and asked me to come back for what they were putting together at that time, which I didn't know, which would be the closing cast the following year. So that was probably around September, October, maybe even earlier than that. And then we closed around like August, September of the next year. So yeah.
What makes me so angry when I hear you sing is I can't, because again, I come from the nerdism of it all. I like try to pin you down, and then you
Hmm.
do something crazy that you're
Uh-huh.
like, I don't know if I'm a tenor or if I'm a bass or something.
Hmm.
Because Tom Collins, that's a character's name, right? I didn't make that up.
Yeah, Tom Collins.
He's not a high singer. He's pretty
Hmm.
low. He sings
Hmm.
something around an F sharp, something relatively low. For
Hmm.
you and your you just explained a little bit about your history with specifically Jonathan Larson's Rent.
Hmm.
When you're approaching something like that, you're the second Tom Collins. Do you think, even back then and today, do you think in the terms of vocal range or vocal color, or is it something like you're like, oh, I'm interested in singing that story? Like, what's the initial impetus of creating something like that?
Well, the great thing about new work, and at that time Rent was a new musical, is
Yeah.
that the show, when I've been involved in other shows where I've been an original cast, the, the keys um, are built around the singers, right?
Mm,
In addition, when you're dealing with a pop rock score, then it also involves interpretation, right?
mm,
So, for example, when I went in for my audition, my first audition to replace Jesse, when he was leaving to do a TV show, I sang the ink. I sang what was on the page.
yeah.
And it was the same way when I went in for the revival of Big River, the Deaf West production. I sang the ink. I sang what was on the page. In both instances, years apart, the feedback came. Mike was a call back. Now we want him to bring what he wants to do to the song.
Mm,
And so then, for me, the process becomes okay. The acting choice and the musical style have to come together. So for me to sing uh, I'll Cover Your Reprise, my voice sits a little bit higher than Jesse's. I don't want to live up there, but it does. But in order to get the same emotional or a similar emotional weight and power that he got in a certain range of his voice, I had to go a little bit higher,
mm,
right?
yeah.
Uh, because emotionally, that was what the character needed. Did I want to sing up in the stratosphere? Did I want to sing high B's every night? No. But there was no other way I could do it and really build to that part that he used to do maybe on a G sharp, right?
Right.
Um, because that's not the same. Our voices aren't the same quality, right?
Right.
And then it became, okay, this is what you did in the callback. Now, continuing with the technique and the training that you've had vocally, how do you then sustain this? How do you do
Mm.
this 8 times a week, right? So my warm-ups were different because I had to sing very low, but I also had to get up to B's, right? Like you said, F sharp. So, you know, it, it, it was about technique and craft, but also married with what were the emotional needs, what was the character trying to say, and what were the best notes to do that. So it never was a mindless kind of riff. It was, if I'm changing something here, what is it? Why is he doing that?
Mm.
Right? And then I was
Yeah.
also in conversation with Tim Wilde, the original musical director, guru extraordinaire, who just had a book that came out about, uh, because he was there from the very beginning.
Wow.
Um, and there were certain things when I came in, he went, change that. I want you to do this instead. I go,
Yeah.
okay. Or here, you got to do something else here. I need something higher for that. And I'm like, okay, I'll figure it out. Or he just say, figure it out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Um, because once again, our voices were very different.
Yeah.
Um, but everything that I do, I try to make sure that there's an emotional need for the note that I sing.
What I find and what I feel from like the audience perspective when you sing, it feels that you carry the weight of what has come before you. Like I
Mm,
don't necessarily know if that means anything.
it does.
But for me, specifically in the shows that you've done, there have been a few instances where queerness, blackness, and musical theater all meet at this intersection that I
Right.
think it'd be impossible to say that without your kind of genius is kind of interpolated in with a sense of gospel roots, with a sense
Mm-hmm.
of pop roots. You know, it's all very. I hear all of your musical taste when you sing.
Mm,
When it comes to meeting of those things, right? In a experience like Rent, I bet that was a little bit more not necessarily welcomed, but there's a sense of queerness, there's a sense of blackness already put into the story.
mm-hmm.
Um, what did you find specifically singing this way in the 90's that you were like, was it a welcomed thing? Was there some people that were naturally hesitant, or like even at times, like we can talk about the systemic racism of it all. There is a natural against pop music, against black music on Broadway when it was the foundation of musical theater to begin with, but beside the point. What is your opinion about when you were introducing this kind of sound, helping introduce this sound to Broadway? Was there anything in particular that you remember that you were like, oh, this was hard, or I didn't realize this was a thing until it happened, you know?
That's interesting because I never think of myself as introducing anything. I just think of myself as standing on shoulders of the folks that have come before me.
Mm.
And so you are very much hitting on something that is important, which is the intersection of my musical history, right?
Mm.
I grew up the son and grandson of a preacher, so I was in church. My whole family, they're all church musicians. So I
Mm.
grew up playing for Sunday school, playing for the children's choir, singing in the youth choir, singing in the adult choir. So that was one of my biggest musical influences. At the same time, my mother was a classical musician. And so she played all the, classical piano pieces at home. My father was a big jazz person, so there was jazz going, and then they both loved R&B of the 70s, which I grew up in the 70s and 80s. And so you have that, you have blues, you have classical, and my uncle was a musical director, so he would take me to see my first show that I saw was Porgy and Bess, which my school went to, which was seeing these people who looked like me singing in this incredibly full uh, way that I had not heard before until that moment, that showed me the breadth and scope of what is possible when I put that into place with the gospel and the jazz and the R&B and B and the funk that I was listening to. And then my uncle, my first cast album was like, there were two. Pearly, the original cast, which was Melvin Moore, Cleavon Little, uh, you know, Sherman Hemsley. So I was hearing that, which was soul and gospel on Broadway, and then Company. And so Sondheim, that Purple album. So once again, I was being influenced by so many different sounds that what I came to have to learn to teach in my work when I was teaching just came naturally to me. So when I went into audition for Miss Saigon, I was singing my more legit musical theater, and there was also a more delineated line then, right? It was, traditional and contemporary, right? It wasn't pop, rock, it wasn't all those things. But when I went in for Tommy, it was specifically rock music, right?
Mm.
And so I had to figure out, what are these songs? I'm not a, Adam Pascal voice, right? So then what
Who
songs,
is?
yeah, right? But what can I sing that is going to let them know that I can live vocally in this world? And I think I did like a Beatles song, like Billy Preston, who played for the Beatles, who's an African American organist, pianist, writer, singer, and who grew up in the gospel world, but also was a big part of the Beatles and their original sound. So
Hmm.
I did like Get Back, that was one of my songs. Another song I did was Lady Marmalade from, from LaBelle, and so both acting songs, one living more in a rock sound, one living more in a more R&B bluesy sound,
Yeah.
but they were very specific and particular to what would suit my voice to let them know that I think I can live in this world vocally. Then once I got cast, it was about singing the style of the music in the way in which the music automatically said it needs to be sung. So I wouldn't sing that music the way I would sing in church on Sunday. I wouldn't sing that music the way I would sing an R&B song from the 80s or 90s. And so for me, because I was so fortunate to have the ability to be exposed to so many kinds of music, when I get a score or music to prepare for an audition, when I was auditioning, I hear it, I read it, and I go, oh, this is the voice that I need for that. So then it
Mm.
becomes about, what are the techniques? What are the things I need to do so that I'm doing this in a healthy way, in a sustainable way, all of the things. But the way I craft sound is based on the needs of the material. But because my vocabulary was wide because of what I was exposed to, I can do that. Whereas
Right.
today, I can literally, and because I started BIV, where some of the people were gospel, some of the people were not. So, how did I find a vocabulary to help people understand the sounds when they didn't grow up in the sounds? So, teaching
Mm.
what are those qualities of sound that not only will give you the sound of the genre of music, but then also will affect you emotionally, right? Because
Mm.
so much of African American music and all the genres that were created, and you said correctly musical theater, but every genre created in this country comes out of a need to express. So the sounds are centered in that need. So you can't just have the sounds
And not the
without the
need.
thing. Right.
Mm.
Makes sense? It's in the DNA of the music.
I remember hearing your voice specifically on the first line of Captain Walker Didn't Come Home.
Uh-huh.
One line you
Mhm.
gave me, Captain Walker Didn't Come Home, soft in the beginning, and in one line you crescendoed into a thicker fold. And I
Mhm.
went, this man's ugly. This
Mm,
man, what he's doing is crazy.
mm,
I would call Tommy, yes, it's led by Tommy, but there's a lot of ensemble driven material.
oh, yeah.
You played multiple things in
Yeah.
that show. People in that show were fucking nuts.
Are you
And
kidding me? What an ensemble of people, right?
I mean, I'm going if the day I meet Sharon A. Scott is a day that the world is going to end because that woman, everyday rapture, everything, it's
Mhm.
incredible. It's incredible. But you are a part of that group of people who were specifically storytellers with their voice. The sound wasn't clean on
Mhm.
purpose. Do you know what I
Mhm.
mean? It wasn't this thought about, and it's great to be educated and to be thoughtful and to be this, but this need that you're talking about, specifically introducing like Tommy to Broadway, which was like
Mhm.
earth shattering
Mhm.
to me.
Mhm.
I call Tommy the tenor one graveyard. Um, and what you just said, you were like, I don't love living on high B's, but I can. Um,
Mm.
I hear you. What I find sneaky about you is that you don't pick to be tenor one in any of the projects that you do. You're like in the middle because you have a good ear, I'm guessing. So you're probably just
I
like, I'm
love it.
saying, how much play was there in the initial impetus of those recordings or that show?
We I did, Joe Church was the musical director, and they had done it already in LA at La Jolla. So they had a very, very clear idea of the sound that they wanted in our ensemble work. And so that was it was very specific. What's interesting is I never listened to the cast album because I was sick. So all I can hear, all I can hear is my stuffy, sinus-filled nose on everything.
You
So I
just
never,
gagged me.
you know, so I never thought about back then, even though and still go to her frequently, an amazing voice teacher. That's the only reason I have a voice today, and that's Joan Later. Um, and she talked in terms of soft roads and all those kind of things. But back then, I was just trying to stay healthy, vocally healthy, right? And
Right.
so I wasn't thinking, oh, I'm going to go from this to this in a technical way. I was trying
Sure.
to figure out how to do it in a way that was healthy, that would once again tell story through the voice, through the actor, right? Um, the interesting thing about Tommy was the entire first act, I sang first tenor. The second act, I sang bass until the finale. Listening to you, they put me back on first tenor. But all the time you can you hear me, I'm on the bottom. All those things in the second act. So they moved me wherever they needed me to be, and I loved that.
Right.
Because that first tenor was, no joke there. And we had, Tim Moorman and Donnie Kerr, and I mean, these guys who are like rock tenors who can live up there. And
Right.
they put me up there with them, and then they moved me down when we got into smaller ensemble stuff.
Right.
Um,
And that's
uh,
also like a part of your musicianship. Like you want you singing the hard part.
I love the challenge of the hard part. I mean, I love figuring that out. And a lot of the work that I've done that has been the most fulfilling has been stuff where it's, once again, I go back to my childhood and not just the musical influences, but the value and importance of music and art in public schools, and that it
Mm,
was valued as something that was essential to the evolution of young minds and hearts. And I just saw a video the other day with them talking about you had to practice if you were going to do right. And so it made your brain process driven, right? It
mm,
wasn't easy gratification. You had to study something. And for me, I had, rehearsals for at church where my sister or my mom, that led the choir, would tell us the words, we'd repeat them back. They would sing the soprano line, the sopranos would sing it back, alto line, tenor line, and then that would maybe be on Thursday, and on Sunday we just sing the song. There was no
mm,
sheet music, but I was also a part of a choral program in junior high school and high school where
mm,
my music Mr. Everson would say, "Okay, here's the soprano, alto, tenor. Here we go." And we would do exercises to strengthen our sight singing. But I learned to sight sing in addition to when I was learning to play the piano. That skill and the combination of both those skills and keeping both of them facile have been the thing that has actually been beneficial
foundational.
to me. Because sometimes I'll go into a recording session with, people from the rock or blues or, pop world, and they just give you some words, and they're like, okay, and your part is, I got to be able to hear and sing that. And then I went into one for an episode of Smash. It was the Joe DiMaggio. It was the baseball number that Marilyn Monroe does. And
Yeah.
I was sent the sheet music like 4 days ahead, and they said you're going to sing baritone. There's four parts. And then I got into the session, and they put me on second tenor. And we're talking Mark Shaman cluster jazz chords. If I
Yeah.
couldn't read, and all the other guys were like studio singers, like they just read, 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 read. And I was like, I cannot be the one that people are looking at crazy. So it was like I shifted that focus and got back into that sight singing thing. And once I was able to know where I was doing two things at the same time. I'm sight reading, but I'm also understanding from my ear where I sit between that first tenor and that baritone part, right?
Right.
And then I had to sing it, right? Without fear and without any hesitation, or, you know what I mean?
Mm,
As I've gotten older and my voice has started to shift because I'm not singing 8 times a week, I am way more aware of technique and how I have to slowly rebuild that technique when I haven't been singing for long periods of time, so that I'm not trying to make my voice do what it did 20 years ago, because it cannot if,
mm.
if I was singing every day like that. I want to
Right.
keep docile enough that I can sing when I want to and need to. Um, but if I had to go back to 8 times a week, I'd have to do a lot of work to get my
But like,
voice.
I think that's like really powerful because I think ego is so much involved in that. Of like
Mm,
you're suddenly having to manage, oh well, are you the same person that you were when you were 25?
no,
Are you the same instrument?
no,
And but your thing of like I have to rebuild, it doesn't end.
yes,
Like the
yes.
process, you know, and I think again, if I'm basing everything off of like, oh my god, look at my credits, then
Hmm.
like suddenly you're like, oh, he doesn't have to rebuild. I'm like, we all have to rebuild.
Yeah, yeah, because all those places, when, it's like doing 8 shows a week is exhausting, but it does build us up a certain kind of strength,
Sure.
right? And so when you stop doing that, those places that you have to navigate through that are, I won't say naturally weak, but places of shifting that,
Sure.
in the tenor, baritone, they're all in different places, right? And for me, it's that E to F, and then it's that G sharp to A. I think that's the specific places. When you stop singing, you lose that dexterity, that ease in those places. So you have to rediscover them with a new voice. So what I do love is that I feel more connected to my sound now in
Mm.
terms of knowing what I'm doing. I feel like I have more life experience, but do I have the ability to wake up in the morning and go sing Tom Collins? Absolutely not. You know what I mean? Which I could do
Yeah.
when I was, 25, 26, 27, right?
Right.
So you gain and you lose, but hopefully you marry the ways in which they kind of vacillate and you come
Intersect.
marry them together, you know?
Yeah. I want to talk about Wild Party.
Okay.
That show is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Your vocal track in that show is
Mm.
crazy.
Yes, it
I want to
is.
start with the soprano melisma.
Oh, right. Once again, okay,
That was
so
crazy.
right, but Michael, that wasn't written. Michael John, that was a ad lib section. But once again, because of who those two characters were, we were trying to differentiate between what it's like to be incredibly pulled and then what it's like to get a little what we call gut bucket, right? So for me, it became about this kind of operatic kind of,
mm.
right? And then the second one, I stayed in falsetto, but I went to a kind of pingy kind of trumpet, right?
Mm.
But both moments were dictated by what the story, the characters needed in that moment, right? And because these two guys are showmen, right?
Mm.
They have the ability to do it all, right? And so they're going to show you everything they got, right?
Yeah.
And so that was something that I created because we had, two sections where we were supposed to do something.
He just said go.
Well,
Um,
actually, because the original song was straight through, and then you notice there was a thing, the little scene in the between
mm.
was added, and so things were built on, once again, in an original cast, things are built on the people who originate them.
Because were you when you was just the two of you? Were you constantly flipping in harmony? Like were you on the top sometimes and he was on the bottom
Yes, we
sometimes?
would flip sometimes. I mean, well, most times when we sang together, Nathan was on top.
That's what
But
I thought, but
then,
I
but then sometimes he would go to the bottom and I'd go to the top. Especially at the end. And I'm trying to think. In ensemble stuff, we were pretty much the two tenors. But then
mm.
we would split. Like, I had that whole thing that I did in the opening, the mad, mad, mad section of, right? And then I'm the only person holding the note at the end of the opening number that leads to that F sharp or in Queenie. So we would split like that. But then on Wild, we were in the group stuff, we were usually on the same part.
Mm.
Um, but mostly I would be like, oh no, Nathan, because
You
Nathan's
got it.
teaching, musical theater genius. I'm like, you take the top. But sometimes we would flip, depending once again on what was being crafted in that moment. When you look at historically what was happening in Harlem at that time and this mass kind of movement of white consumption coming up to Harlem to consume Black culture, as we're coming out of a very Victorian, very reserved, dresses are getting shorter, hair's getting cut shorter, wardrobe is getting freer, and with that, jazz is evolving. Great migration of more black people, but black talent moving from New Orleans and coming up from the South. It was a time that was so rich with writers and painters and everybody, because it was such a time of being, prohibition was going on, so everything was like
Yeah.
undercover. That gave Harlem a kind of, for I think white consumption, a kind of danger, and it's this interesting jazz and all these things. Um, and it's very interesting that black performers in most of these clubs could not go to those clubs as attendees. You know,
Mm,
so learning how to do your thing in multiple ways, because Oscar and Phil would probably, if they were at the Cotton Club, they would their performance would be a little bit more,
refined.
pop. But
Yeah.
then if they went to one of the all black, after hours speakeasies or something, it would have they'd still be classy because they're just classy guys. But
Yeah.
it would have a little, it would be tailored more to the audience, right? As this
Yeah.
is us, right? And so all of those artists of that time were capable of doing multiple things, right? And sometimes history only remembers what's through the lens of who's telling the story. But having George as our director and writer, he made sure there were things that were in there. The line about Carl Van Vechten, I mean, it's like there
Mm,
were things that he was making commentary on, that he was using the characters through their lens to have a point of view about. And
yeah.
so um, it always felt uh, vocal. Once again, when you have a brilliant composer like Michael, um, you you you're given brilliant material. You have a brilliant director, writer, and a brilliant cast, and it's so freeing in a way because it allows you to bring everything you have and craft something that does not ask you to put parts of yourself away. If anything, George kept saying bigger, more, more. These
Mm.
guys were bigger than life, right? But we all had to be bigger than life in order to have something to fall from, right? Which is
Because she
the
falls quick. She
yeah,
falls quick.
yeah. It turns ugly and dark real fast, right? And
Mm,
so the higher we could be, and so then understanding how these men moved in that period, the clothes, all our suits were made for our bodies. So, and watching all of these, listening to the recordings, like when I sang Taboo, it was right up off of a Vitrola. That was the quality of sound that I was going for, right?
mm.
It once again required me to do all of the things that I could do, right? Vocally and physically, but it all served the actor and the character and what the character needed to do and how they chose to do it through what they sang.
I and I think there is I think what was so beautiful about the city center version was then now we can explore, correct me if I'm wrong, the original intent of having Queenie be of mixed race.
Hmm.
Um, did you see the city center version?
I did. Mark and I went together.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah, we went together.
What was your reaction? You were like, that show's crazy.
Well, for me, it was the same way when they invited the original cast of Tommy to see the revival. It's very interesting to live in two worlds simultaneously, right? So, as with Tommy with Wild Party, as the show is going, I'm actually reliving what I was doing
Yeah.
while I'm also watching it being done by someone differently in a different way. What I came away from it with is how much I love that score. I came away with the question because we weren't open that long. We had previews, and then we maybe were open a month. Um, I never experienced any vocal challenge singing that score.
Wow.
And I didn't feel like anybody in our cast did, but I wondered, could this have been sustained at this emotional level and vocal level,
Yeah.
right? Because it's asking you to bring a lot simultaneously. But for me, mostly it's Michael John's score is he was doing something that was so true to the period while also still maintaining his sound, his signature as a composer. So it was just great to hear it again.
And that
Um,
big pit.
yeah,
That was a big old pit.
I was sad they
I
cut a couple things, but that they cut
I
Golden Boy, and then the reconciliation of the brothers. That was hard for me because we're the ones that got that put in. Because if we go back to the audition, the original intention was that the brothers play the piano. So for
oh,
my
like
audition,
actually.
yes. So for my audition, Wild was not in the show then. The song that was in that position where things start to dismantle and go a little crazy is was a song called the Orangutan Song, and it was the brothers' like featured performance song. So for the audition, I had to come in and play and sing the song. It was 30 pages, and it was all stride piano,
Oh God.
right? And so I played and sang the song. And then when I was cast, then they had me come in with the two people who were the top two fill contenders. And the minute Nathan walked in, I was like, that's him. And we just immediately had this relationship.
Clicked.
And so through rehearsal and the beginning of the previews, the orangutan song was still in. One Sunday after our matinee, we'd done an 8-show week. We were called down after the matinee to the lobby where Michael handed us his chicken scrawled pages, and it was wild. We learned it, and probably we had Monday off, and probably by Thursday it was in the show, and
Crazy.
it replaced the orangutan song. So it became this kind of breakdown of all these multiple things happening at the same time.
Right. Right.
Um, and so that audition experience was pretty wild. But also being there and watching the evolution, like Dry was 3 minutes longer. They replaced We Share Everything was actually the original song they sang together, and he wrote My Best Friend, and then We Share Everything became the song that they did in the show together, right?
Ah.
That little excerpt of it. So anyway, when we were in the show rehearsals, we kept going to Michael John and George and going, the brothers have this big falling out, and they never come back together.
Yeah.
And so one day, Michael John brings in, that taboo reprise that the two of them sing in the middle of Golden Boy, um, and
Mm.
adds that. And then it went into the middle of Golden Boy. So that was disheartening to see, first of all, Golden Boy, because of the historical accuracy of what that is talking about. And then that moment of reconciliation for the two of, we always come back to each other, come mourn, right? I missed that.
Norm Lewis formed like the baritone sound of the 90's.
Hmm.
The way he sounds on Golden Boy is
Hmm.
actually insane. Correct me if I'm wrong. In the original version, does Jackie hook up with both of them or just That's what I thought. I said we need a moment where somebody isn't picked because
Hmm.
that feeling of being torn apart by one man
Hmm.
is something everybody knows.
But also, given the period, given the racial dynamic, one white man, right? So it takes on multiple levels there. Phil, I think, is the one that's always keeping everything together, which he says in their fight. He's the one that keeps them together. Oscar's a little flighty. He's a little, he's easily distracted. Phil is the one that's disciplined. I mean, not about the work. Oscar does work, but
Yeah.
about just he's just a little flighty, and so he's easily distracted by someone, and you see it happen. Jackie chooses him, not like he chooses him, particularly him for some special reason. He decides that's where I'm going to go, right? He probably wouldn't have gotten nowhere with Phil, right? But he
Mm,
still chose Oscar, not like he wanted Oscar forever and a day. It was, this is who I want to play with today, and
mm.
that's what I'm going to do, right?
Yeah.
It's the pursuit.
Shout out to Tanya Pinkins because she's
Hmm.
been the OG.
Hmm.
She's been the original, and
Hmm.
I just found what better person to take on Dolores than
Hmm.
Miss Tanya Pinkins.
Hmm.
What I wanted to end with today was your work in in Broadway Inspirational Voices. Your work as an educator now at NYU, and you've worked at multiple different places.
Mhm.
What is, as you continue as an artist, as you continue as an educator, I'm finding in my own life, as a teacher, like, how do we keep both things alive
Mhm.
at the same time? What is some of the first things that you work with in a student when it comes to like the building of a voice? I'm always really interested in other voice teachers' initial thoughts on that.
That's very interesting because when I taught, I moved into another space now. I taught what we call people call different things: vocal performance, acting through song. So for me, it was never about teaching vocal technique. We had voice faculty who did that. I have language from that because of what I've had to do personally in my amazing voice teacher and working with voice faculty, but I never had to do that. My
Mm,
thing was always about in my work is reactivating or fully engaging the physical body as the impulse, right? You know, um, one of the examples, you never hear of a child, a baby crying, losing their voice, right?
right,
Right? There's something about when the body is fully activated, how it connects to the voice. And over years of how we hold anger, hold emotion, hear sounds and replicate them. We develop and our own natural and our own original vocal folds and what they do and everything around them, we develop habits, right? But for me, I think the thing that I always start from is the body, and that
mm,
the body is the thing that has to be activated to give sound, to impulse, all of those things. It cannot be disconnected from that because then your body will tell on you. Your body's a truth teller. And
mm,
so if we can connect there, that helps with voice things, the exercises I give, it helps with the acting choices, it helps with everything, right? So I start from there. And then it's about partnering with voice faculty to make sure that students individually their needs are being met based on their individuality. And then also, what are the touchstones, the guideposts that we all have to be getting to by certain points, right?
mm.
But vocal health to me is very closely related to physical health, mental health, and being strong. Um, but it's like if your body is facile, it really does help. And even as I go from just not singing to singing, I'm always like, okay, Michael, what are you holding?
Mm.
This note isn't just hard because it's high and you haven't been singing here. It's because you're holding somewhere that you need to be releasing something. And I know all the things that I can remember from my voice lessons and put into play. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. Not only was your tongue
I
in the right place, but you were actually holding here when you should have actually given space here. Those kind of things. Yeah. Go through that process. In
yeah.
when I'm learning music again, the first 2 weeks, I can't sing. I sound like a crazy person. I sound like I've never done any singing in my life. But I know that's a part of my process. But I know if I trust the process and really trust putting into place all of the vocal skills, not the sound making, but the apparatus things that I have,
Wow.
then the sounds will start to find where they sit in a healthy way. But if I try to push through, I'm not going to get there.
That kind of, I connected with that a lot because I find when I'm learning a role, specifically in like, you know, comparing, let's just say, opera and musical theater, opera, like, you're given like, you do private work for 6 months to even do a public performance of it, like in a concert, right?
Mhm,
But in musical theater, it is about quick results and fast.
mhm.
And the fact you were like, I sound like a crazy person in the first 2 weeks, I'm always worried. You're like, do I know how to do this? Like, what is going on? To the fact you even released that, I was like, oh, I see myself in that thoroughly because I'm like, sometimes I get caught up in the fact that again, musical theater I found, especially at a commercial level, is how fast can you give me the thing that I'm asking for?
Mhm. Yeah.
Has there been any change for you when it comes to like let's just say your later experience, and do you have bootlegs of Next to Normal? Be honest.
I have what?
Do you have recordings of you doing Next to Normal? Be
No,
honest.
no.
I'll find it. Don't worry.
But see, this is
Uh,
an interesting thing. I got a call on Sunday night. from my agent, who never called me on a Sunday night, to say, can you start in Next to Normal on Broadway tomorrow and potentially go on Saturday? Because of just someone was out and someone had surgery. And so it wasn't that the person wasn't there. They just were concerned coming back from surgery if the actor would be able to sustain an 8-show week.
Right.
So I learned that show in 2 days. We had Wednesday off, came in on Thursday. Michael Greif ran my understudy rehearsal on Thursday and Friday.
He said,
And
get
then,
it here.
right? And then Saturday, I didn't have to go on. So I stayed for 2 weeks. Then they brought me back. I stayed for another 4 weeks, never went on. And then a year later, they called me and said, can you actually go on the tour for 5 weeks? And so I learned it by myself, relearned it, worked with the stage manager from Broadway for a week, going through blocking. And then I joined the company, I think it was Seattle. I came in on a Monday, on a Tuesday. I had a run through, and all the choreography had changed. So I learned all of that and went on Thursday matinee and then did it for 5 weeks. And I have to say, one of the things that I learned, besides the fact that I know I can do that, is that it was really hard was that without a rehearsal process, and specifically for a role like the doctor where everything that comes out of his mouth is medical jargon. It doesn't just, you can't just make it up, right? I never felt comfortable. I never felt comfortable because I didn't have the rehearsal process that I so deeply relate to. Even with Rent, I had 2 weeks before I went, and then I went on 4 days before I was supposed to, but I was ready because every day I was going home, moving my furniture and running through the show from beginning to end, all my backstage traffic. When I put things in my pocket, I was doing that every day while I was running the show. So when I went on a Saturday night, I was ready. I was terrified, but I was ready, you know. So I'm not having a rehearsal process and then having to just jump into something like that. I never was able to release that angst, that anxiety.
Right.
So it was a process where I went, I could do it, but would I say it was joyful? Even though I loved the show and loved doing it and really connecting with Alice, and she was an anchor for me because we'd done Tommy together, right? The original cast of Tommy. So, but it was hard. It was hard.
And
right?
It's not comfortable. Do you know what I mean? Like,
No.
so suddenly this, that's just, but the main thing that I kind of wanted to get at today was not only the respect I have for you as a musician, and then additionally as an educator, and then additionally as a performer, you and your career have laid a groundwork for somebody like me to go, oh, it's possible. It's possible, and to do it at a high level. That score is not easy.
No. And I love that. That's the challenge of what I love.
Right. I'd poop myself. Michael, thank you for your time today.
Sure.
That's our episode. Thank you so much to our guest for joining me this week, and thank you for listening. Please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts as new episodes drop every few weeks. If you like our work, go ahead and join us over on Patreon, where you can get exclusive content from the show and our guests, as well as a community of singers wanting to deepen their work and keep exploring. And share this episode with a friend, because the more we talk about the voice, the less we feel alone. I'm Liam Joshua Munn, and this has been The Vocal Project.